FM94, it is that time again. It's time to get to know a band we play here on The Dark. And tonight on the phone, I am talking with the legendary bassist from the band Megadeath, Grammy Award-winning guy from obviously the band Megadeath, and I should say Minnesota native, too, that being David Ellefson. And David, thanks so much for joining me, and how you doing?
You're welcome, man. You're welcome. Happy New Year to you, and good to be talking to the homeland of Minnesota.
I was going to say, did I miss any titles there? I'm sure you have plenty of more titles to get to, but those are just a few, I guess, to introduce you.
Yeah, I mean, those are, look, it's so funny. I've got so many little things going on between Ellefson Coffee Company and EMP Label Group, and of course now this new thing that I'm doing with Frank Bello from Anthrax. We have our new group, Altitudes and Attitude, and all that. So it's kind of funny how, look, throw a dart, and I'm sure you'll hit one of the things I'm involved in.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring you in really to talk about Altitudes and Attitude. That was really the reason why I brought you on, because obviously we're spinning your latest song late here, and I kind of want to get the history of this. And I know this isn't something new, because if I remember right, a few years ago you guys kind of got together on this. Give us the history. Give us the nuts and bolts. How did this all come about?
Yep, sure will. So, in 2010, I came back into Megadeth. We were out doing the 20th anniversary of Rust in Peace, and along that was also the Big Four shows with Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax. All of us joining forces. We were kind of competitors back in the day, and then all of a sudden we joined forces to unite for the movement and the fans, and we did these big stadium shows around the world. And during that process, Frank Bello and I started doing some bass clinics with our amplifier company called Harkey, based out of New York. And, while we were doing the clinics, I leaned over to him one night in London. I said, you and I should really just write some backing tracks or some songs so we kind of have something we could play at these bass clinic things that we do, because it's pretty cool, two pretty well-known thrash metal bassists doing something. So that's what led to us starting to write together. But what was interesting is when we started throwing ideas at each other, they weren't thrash metal ideas. They were these, Frank crafted these, like what you heard late, which is the track you're spinning is a song that Frank brought in. I write more on guitar, to be honest with you. So my stuff is actually a little more, kind of riffy. Kind of guitar, hard rock, heavy metal, riffy kind of stuff that I write, and that was where it started. That was I guess 5 years ago when we started that, and we put out that first EP in 2014. And since then we've been diligently getting together, working on this thing in Los Angeles at our producer's studio, and we just needed to find the right time to put it out. We kind of thought we might put it out in 2018, but then Frank got busy. Anthrax was out doing a lot of the Slayer farewell tour, and so we had this little sliver of time right now in January and February of 2019 to put this out before we both get busy with Megadeth and Anthrax again.
And that's the story, basically. And, of course, you have a new album that is coming out on January 18th called Get It Out. And, of course, the one song on there is Late. And I guess, let me ask you this. Obviously, you're a bassist with Megadeth. He's a bassist with Anthrax. Who plays bass in this thing?
Well, on the record, I actually played bass to all of it, and it was funny. Our roles kind of sort of naturally develop inside of bands, and in this case, of course, maybe a little more undecided because here we are, two bass players walking in. But it's funny, when we brought the songs in, we brought them in as guitar players, and Frank is a really great singer to his songs. His voice really lends itself well inside of his music. He's a great lyricist. He and I collaborated on a lot of lyrics on the record as well, and he really just he's a great narrator through lyric and through music. So I really enjoyed playing bass to the music and the songs that Frank brought in, because they're very they kind of remind me of this sort of Cheap Trick late 70s, kind of early 80s, kind of new wave, Joe Jackson, Cheap Trick, the Cars. There's all this kind of music that was around back in those days that both Frank and I grew up on, in addition to the heavy metal stuff that we both liked.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, with this album and that you put together, do you have some special guests on the album? Because Obviously you mentioned Frank is doing some singing, but it can't be just you two only. There has to be somebody else playing behind you. So who else is helping you out?
Yeah, we did. On the drums, we had Jeff Friedel from A Perfect Circle. He cut all the drums for the record. Frank and I played all the rhythm guitar, and like I said, I played all the bass. The 8-string bass was brought in, which is a unique instrument. It actually allowed me to play more kind of lead guitar solos on the instrument, so you hear a lot of that throughout the record. And then we brought in some of our guitar player buddies, and in fact, the track that you're spinning late has our friend Ace Frehley playing the lead guitar solo on that, and so we can officially say Ace Frehley lead guitar, just like those Kiss Alive album.
Absolutely. That's awesome. That is awesome to hear. And of course, what's the reaction, I guess, of people out there right now? Of course, this is kind of early in the game, but what are people saying about this?
Well, people seem to like it when we put just the 3 songs out a few years ago, because it's something very different. It's not Frank and I trying to be heavy metal guys, because we already play in 2 of the greatest heavy metal bands out there, and we don't need to go recreate that. So, I think this is, people see it for what it really is. It's Frank and Dave just stepping away for a minute to have a moment together as kind of a bass player bromance, if you will, and we're good friends. We've grown up together and shared the stage together so much. So it's really just kind of this cool moment, I think, for our fans to get a little bit of a breather. And of course, coming down the pike a little later will be Megadeth and Anthrax records, probably later this year. So, again, I think people just I think they appreciate it for what it is. Just Frank and I taking a little break and doing something that comes up for air and kind of has a nice, refreshing sound to it.
Does it give you a chance to maybe stay out of big stadiums and go play in smaller clubs then because of this?
It does. I mean, I went down to see Slash when he was in town a couple months ago, and I brought him down some of my Ellefson coffee and, just to hang out for a bit. He and I have been, friends for quite a few years, since the late 80s, actually, so I guess probably about 20 years or so. And I mentioned to him about this record, and he was kind enough to actually put us on some dates with him over in Europe. So aside from what we're doing next week in New York, and we're doing a little show out in Los Angeles, and then we're doing the Shiprock Cruise after that. And then kind of mid-late February, we're going to be over in Europe doing about 10 days over there with Slash. So, we kind of get a little bit of all. We get to do a cruise, we get to do some arenas with Slash, we get to do some club dates in New York, and we kind of get a whole smattering of it.
Yeah, and then you get to go back to work with Megadeth and then go on tour with Ozzy this year, don't you?
Exactly. And I think, are we hitting, forgive me for not knowing this, I've seen the routing, of course, but I believe, are we hitting the Minneapolis area? I think we are, right?
Yes, you are. In fact, you guys will be here in, I believe it is July 6th to be exact. Ozzy, Megadeth, Perfect. And I think Zakk Wylde is on that too, correct? He's going to be playing, I'm assuming, so.
I don't know about that, and you probably are right. In fact, I hate. It's funny. I'm in the band. I'm on the bill playing it. And you probably know more about it than I do. But it's Father Zakk, as we call him, and it'll be great. It's a good hang, man. It's obviously Ozzy. We did a big run in South America back in 2014, I think. Okay. Black Sabbath and Megadeth and big stadium tour down across Latin America. That was a lot of fun with them, and. We've done Ozfest before and all kinds of stuff. So, there's a good history there, and I think, it's kind of I think for heavy metal, I think it's probably the concert of the summer. Awesome. We're talking with David Ellefson, of course, from the band Megadeth, and he's got his new project, Altitudes and Attitude. Did we figure out which is which, you and Frank, who's what and what's who? Or between... I think it's funny. I know it's kind of a bit of a tricky name to say. Yeah. I just said it one day in the studio. I said, hey, how about Altitudes and Attitude? I was kind of thinking it was kind of more of an album title more than a band name, but it stuck. And I said, we could just do what the Foo Fighters do, and, they do FF. Why don't we just do A&A? So, just when we're just chatting about it, we just call it A&A, and, we're at one point we're going, do we call it Ellefson? Like, what do we call this thing? But we landed on Altitudes and Attitude. As the old saying goes, you can call us whatever you want, just as long as you call us. As long as you call us, exactly. Hey, let's switch over to Megadeth a little bit. A new album, is that in the works here in 19? It is. Yep, absolutely. Yep, working on it now. We've been working on it this whole last year. We've been writing and putting things into just kind of getting everything sort of pieced together, and that's the stage that it's in now. Just getting the arrangements all put together, and we've each been putting parts down and working on that. So yeah, it's definitely coming along, and don't know exactly when the release will be. My thought is mid to late 2019. I mean, records do take a while. It could be early 2020, but we'll definitely have some new music and some stuff for people to hear. I'm sure at some point this year.
Well, get your fans all excited. That's all that matters, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got it's cool that we can still create good music. That doesn't happen all the time in groups, and I think. Kind of with the big four, it's cool because we've all put out, I think, pretty compelling records here in recent years, and that's a pretty good testimony that the juices haven't dried up. We still got the passion for the music and the passion for the lifestyle and our fans.
Here on The Dark, what we do is we like to bring up a lot of up-and-comer bands. I talk to a lot of those up-and-coming bands. They're the baby bands, basically, of today. And, of course, your new project, Altitudes and Attitude, is kind of that a little bit. But, of course, with Megadeath, you've been out there for years and one of the top bands for so many years. Let me ask you this question. How much has the music industry changed from back early in the late 80s, 90s to today?
Well, there's a lot of it, for the bigger established bands. I mean, some of the rules are the same. I mean, I guess, when you're building something, you make an album, you put it out. That's sort of your presentation it's your advertisement of, hey, here's who we are, here's what we sound like, come and see us play live, So I guess on some level that part hasn't changed. I guess we're like Megadeth and, bands of our generation. Certainly the album sales are way, way diminished from what they used to be. I talked to a lot of, people under the age of 30, and they don't buy albums. They buy singles. That's just their buying pattern. That's how they've always bought things. My age group, we always bought albums. We liked that whole, 8, 10, 12 songs that you could sit down and, and listen to. So, I think a lot of it is just kind of in the kind of the consumer buying pattern, and certainly our smartphones have changed that because people go to YouTube, they subscribe to Spotify, Pandora. I'm old school. I actually still buy stuff on iTunes, which is probably kind of stupid of me because I could get it for free. But I'm just trained that way, I'm trained that way, and I support my friends. When I buy an album, I pay for it. When I buy a new Maiden album, I pay for it, and it's just kind of how I am. I mean, I know how my mortgage got paid over the years, so I'm kind of like, let me pay it forward to everybody else too.
Right. And one thing now is these, up and coming bands, really the way they're making money isn't because of the records or anything. It's going to do shows and selling the T-shirts and all the memorabilia, isn't it?
It is, and you've been very kind to support our artist Dalskin, who is a band that I produced, and essentially started my record label for them, my EMP label group, and it was the same thing. We put a record out, and it's hard to connect it retail and the big. Years ago, Megadeth, we'd come into town, we'd stop at Best Buy. There's a Best Buy in every big city. Yep. And, there'd be 2,000 people lined up around the building, and we'd sit there for 2-3 hours and sign all the CDs and all that kind of stuff. And, you legitimately would sell a couple thousand CDs that afternoon. That was one of the ways that you created, attention to an album. But, that just doesn't happen anymore. And so, like with the Dalskin, for instance, they obviously you've given them an attention, and that helps spread the word. And then when they come through town and perform, they then can go after they perform, go out to the merchandising booth and sign autographs and take pictures with the fans. And at that point, the CD. It serves just as much as a piece of paper to put for the band to put their autographs on, for the fan to take something home. And by the way, it has music on it too.
Right, exactly.
So I think what music means has changed to to younger generations, and that's, my son grew up playing video games, and music was sort of a background to the action on the screen. Same with sports. You watch Monday Night Football, and you hear kind of these heavy metal riffs in the background, and the heavy metal isn't in the front; it's a backing track to a guy throwing a football. So I think music has some of the celebrity around it has sort of gone away, and the purposes of why music is even listened to, it's changed from what it used to be.
Absolutely, it has. And I know you helped Dalskin out a lot. Are some other bands or maybe some other projects that you're trying to help out some of these up-and-coming bands, or maybe not even bands per se, but maybe just young people in the music industry?
Yeah, honestly, that's more what it is. I mean, Alice Cooper's son, Dash, has a great band called Co-op, and we supported them on the label and put their album out for them, and we had a nice radio campaign. Of course, it's nice when Dad has a radio show.
Yeah,
nice
that helps.
Alice Cooper. And, Alice is a big supporter. I mean, he supports classic rock, new bands. He's got a great vehicle, so he's kind of the same guy. He's got a good heart for music. Alice is a real music fan, and, so he's helpful with that. But, yeah, there's even a couple of artists. I was introduced to a young lady out of Nashville, and she had more of kind of an edgy rock sound, so I hooked her up with Evan Rodaniche, who produced the Dalskin record for me, produced Escape the Fate, some younger bands, and so he's doing kind of a writing, recording project with her, and she's great. I mean, she sounds like somewhere between Paramore and Sia or something, So, for me, when I hear artists that are just really passionate and they really have a gift to write and record, and I champion that, because I know what it means to sort of feel validated that I went in, I wrote a song, I recorded it, and it actually got out of the studio and somebody heard it, and that's a very rewarding and gratifying process. So anytime I can support that, I do.
We're talking with David Ellefson, of course, from Megadeath, and also his new project, Altitudes and Attitude. And you are a Minnesota kid, so I got to ask that. Do you get a chance to come back to your home roots in Jackson, Minnesota at all?
I do. Well, when we started the Ellefson Coffee Company, we actually set up a shingle on Main Street of Jackson, Minnesota, and it's now inside of a cool little barbecue restaurant there called Cat's Hog Heaven. And we've had just great support there. They were kind enough on October 9th to proclamate that day officially now from the forever to be David Ellefson Day.
Very cool.
So it's like I couldn't wait to leave the farm to go to Hollywood, and who knew that one day I'd come back home with a Grammy under my arm.
Absolutely.
The people of Minnesota, in general, as a state, and certainly my little town of Jackson, they've been, I guess they're pretty proud of their hometown boy, and I'm glad to make them proud. It's I'm a farm boy at heart. I still own some farmland down there, and so I'm a tax-paying member of the society, and I'm just proud that my roots are there, and I've been able to bring so much of the celebrated success of my life that I've been able to bring that back home to Minnesota.
So did California, I guess, rub you the wrong way, or are you still Minnesota nice, I guess? That's my question.
I think I'm still Minnesota nice. I mean, I listen to, it's funny, I watch old YouTube videos, I mean, anything you say can and will be used against you on the internet, So yeah. There's some old videos of us from like the early 90s, when we were, when Megadeth was really, getting some traction and getting a lot of the spotlight. And it's funny, I sound kind of like a California kid. And so I guess it rubbed off on me. But when I got out of there, I moved, 25 years ago, my wife and I moved to out here to Scottsdale, Arizona. And, I immediately felt at home here. And then I realized after I was here for a little while, everybody here is from the Midwest.
I was just going to say.
They're snowbirds, or they grew up here, and there's some kind of like sort of Protestant tie back to the Midwest, So I guess that's probably why I feel so at home here in Arizona.
I was going to say, you don't have a walker or a cane, but you are down in Arizona where everybody else is right now from Minnesota. So us up here that have to suffer through these negative temperatures aren't feeling so bad for you right now.
Yeah, look, I had my good time through that too. In fact, when you're going to Minnesota, I mean, and especially when you're a kid going to school, I mean, man, there's nothing better than snow days.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know we got to get you going here, but I do want to touch base. Obviously, you talked about your coffee and that. Is there anything else that you would want to push, I guess, or talk about, I guess? I'll give you that time to do so.
I thank you. I appreciate it. One of the things we did with the David Ellefson Day on October 9th is we started the David Ellefson Youth Music Foundation, and that is a 501c3 nonprofit that we created specifically to continue to support music programs in the rural areas, because that's my story. I'm a kid from a rural area, and farmers have had a lot of money. They've not had a lot of money, depending on sometimes global issues and things that go on. But a lot of attention is always paid, certainly, to the big inner city struggles, and they have needs too. But for me, my story is I'm a small town kid, and a lot of the small towns in the Midwest and around the country, they suffer. So we started that, and we're getting a website built and that all put together. We're going to probably do a little fundraising this next year for that, just so that we always have some resources. We partnered in with the Grammys. They're the Grammy Music Education Coalition. So we've got some cool things that have really happened with this. I've been blessed. I've worked hard, but I've been blessed with some nice success. So I'm just now at this point in my life and my career, just turning those things into ways to try to give back.
That is awesome. And right here at Little Falls, Minnesota, they have the St. Francis Music Center, which has a lot of young kids that go there. They do their lessons and that, and they've even turned out some rock bands out of there too, which is really cool. So it's cool to hear that you're trying to support rural things too, not just inner city or that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's just my story, and I think it just resonated well for me, to do that, and again, I'm always proud to be a Minnesota native. So I got to get back and get my scotcheroos and on my tater tot hot dish at least once or twice a year too. So good reason to get back there.
There you go. It's time for a potluck with David Ellefson. All right.
I love it. Let's do it.
Hey, give us more information, how people can find out more information about the new record coming out here for Altitudes and Attitude.
Sure. Altitudesandattitude.com, of course, is that. On our social media, Alt and At, so ALT and ATT. I know it's kind of confusing, but if you scroll through on Instagram and that, but also on Facebook, of course, Altitudes and Attitude. Is our shingle. That's our home there. And tour dates are up. And, of course, everything kind of pushes through also to my home of davidellefson.com. So, if anybody wants to see what we're up to and where we're going to be here over the next couple of months, that's the home. And, of course, Megadeath, everything there is megadeath.com. For what's coming up here, we got a busy year starting in May with the Aussie tour and the Mega Cruise, and
absolutely
going back down to Rock and Rio and all kinds of big fun stuff.
All sorts of things, and just maybe by chance you can make a stop in Little Falls sometime. You and Frank can hang out for a little bit and play. That'd be kind of fun.
Well, I tell you what, I would love that. That's you guys are really, really great with supporting up and coming things, and I know Frank and I are probably kind of considered big rock stars in other campuses, but with our little band, we're kind of just a scrappy young little band, getting started like everybody else. So we always appreciate the support. So, maybe, who knows? Maybe there might be a little window in the schedule where we can get up and see you guys.
That'd be awesome. David, thanks so much for your time. I wish you the best of luck on this project, also with the tour coming up with Megadeath. And as always, keep rocking, okay?
Cool, man. Thanks so much, Daisy. Appreciate it.
Once again, that is David Ellefson, of course, from Megadeth, and his new project, Altitudes and Attitude. The latest song is called Late. You're hearing it right now. It's on The Dark. It's on FM94.